Hello and welcome to the calculator guide video on the FX82 ES Plus 2nd edition beginner's guide. This is also going to be relevant for if you have the FX85 ES Plus 2nd edition and the FX350 ES Plus 2nd edition as well. Now, I'm not going to cover absolutely every function available on this calculator. This is just a beginner's guide for if you're starting from new, and if you are familiar with previous versions of these calculators from CASIO, you will find this one to be a very similar setup. But I'll take it from the very beginning and run through the key features that you need to know. So obviously, once you've pressed the on button from factory settings, you should see a cursor displayed, and you should have a D and math displayed on the top of your screen there. Now, the D indicates that your calculator angle unit is currently in degrees, which is going to be relevant for the trigonometric functions. I'll show you how to use those a little bit later. And math indicates the format to which your numbers, particularly fractions and radicals or surds, are inputted and then displayed as an answer. And we'll have a look at that in just a moment. We'll start off by having a look at mode. So if you just press the mode button, you'll see that we have three modes available to us on this calculator. We have one which is comp, which is computational mode, which is the default mode in which we do most of our calculations, and that is the starting mode that we were just in there. We've also got stat or statistics mode, which we will look at briefly later on, and table mode, which allows us to do tables of functions. So we're just going to remain in comp for now, so press 1. And you can see here that we can do basic arithmetic calculations. I'm doing 5 multiplied by 2 equals to get your answer. One thing that I do like about the calculator is the clarity of the font and display on the keys here. It's slightly different on the emulator that I have, but I think it's very similar on the actual calculator model. So your answer is displayed here. Now, if you want to use this answer in a second calculation, for example, if I wanted to add 2, I can just literally press plus, and you can see here that we've got ants, which is automatically using the answer from the previous calculation in our next calculation. I can press 2 and then get my answer to that, which is going to be 12. If I wanted to use that later on in the calculation, say if I wanted to do 60 divided by that answer, I could do 60 divided by, and then I can use the answer button to include that answer in a subsequent calculation, which gives me 5. Now let's take a deeper look at how numbers are displayed. So we're currently in math mode. Well, we're going to have a look in setup. Now, to access this feature or any feature indicated in yellow above each of the primary buttons, we need to press the shift button first. So it's shift and then setup. And you can see that we've got a range of options. Now, option 1 here is Math I/O, Math Input Output. And if we have a look in there, you can change the way that your results are formatted. So our initial or default setting was Math Output. And let's say we want to do the square root of 2. And if we put that in, if we want to navigate so that we're no longer within the square root, we need to use the navigation button to navigate right. You can see that's come out of the square root then. Multiplied by, say, square root of 5, for example. If we press equals then, that gives us the result as a radical or a surd, square root 10 by default. Now what we can do is we can press this handy button, S to D, to change that to a decimal approximation. Now let's say you wanted this straight away as your answer rather than the square root answer, then if we go to shift and setup and 1 for math input output and select line output 2, and let's just do that again, square root 2 right multiplied by square root 5, press equals, you can see straight away there that we've got decimal approximation. Now incidentally, that doesn't work for fractions. With math input, you can see that that's displayed on 2 layers, which is incredibly useful. Let's say that we've got 8 fifths, so it's 8, navigate to the bottom fifths, press equals. You can see that that is still displayed as a fraction. We need to press SD to give that as a decimal approximation. Now what we can do is we can change the way that the fractions are inputted with a line input. So if we go Shift and Set Up and choose 2, and now we are in line input and output, you can see that indicated by a 0 displayed here, and we no longer have math displayed here at the top. So if I now do 8/5, you'll notice that the way in which the fraction is displayed has changed. We've got this backwards L shape essentially representing the line of the fraction. If I press equals here, again I've still got the fraction in the first instance. Press SD if I want the decimal equivalent of that to be given. I'm just going to switch back to math input and output, so it's Shift Mode 1 and 1. You need to make a decision depending on the type of maths that's covered where you live and the type of qualification that you're studying, whether it's more useful to have, particularly with your radicals or your surds, displayed as a decimal straight away or as a fraction. Don't forget you can always press SD if you have it as a fraction to get the decimal equivalent. Now let's have a look further in Setup, Shift and Setup. Now you can see that we've got 3 different angle units that we can choose from here, and I will change those when we have a look at the trigonometric functions. By default it's in degrees, which tends to be the most commonly used, but we also have 4 for radians here and 5 for the lesser used gradians. Now what we've also got on this page is 3 different ways that we can display numbers. Fix means that you have a fixed number of decimal places in your answer. I tend to find that that's not particularly useful generally, but you might want to explore that and see what that's all about. 7 is Sci for science notation, what we call standard form or standard index form here in the UK. And I'll give you an example of how that works. If we select that as the way that we display that, we can also have a selected number of digits here that we can display this as. If I wish to use this, what I tend to do is to select 0, which gives you the full calculated display of significant figures in your answer. But you can fix that so that it will round your answer to a given number of significant figures. So if we choose 0 in the first instance, and let's do a number, let's say 1568, we've inputted that as a regular number. If we press equals, you can see that we've got this in science notation here. It's given us a full calculated display of significant figures here, and obviously we know that we can cut that off here as these are insignificant zeros. So it's 1.568 times 10 to the 3, and let's say we select Shift, Setup, Sci, and let's say we select one significant figure, we can see that that's automatically rounded that to 2 times 10 to the 3 and so on. So if you're going to use science notation, I tend to find that choosing 0 is the best option there, but you've got options available if you did want to fix it at a certain number of significant figures. The regular display is Shift, Setup, Norm, which is 8, and I would choose Norm 2. What happens with Norm 1 is if you have large or small numbers, it will default to scientific notation. So 2 tends to be the best one. That will give us regular numbers up until I think about times 10 to the 9, or the equivalent for the negative as well, I think. And then it'll start to use science notation standard form for very large and very small numbers on there. So go for Norm 2, that's usually the best option for those. Okay, so we briefly used the fraction button there, which is very useful for inputting fractions or divides, or setting up 2 layers to input on the calculator. Again, we use the example of 8/5, and then we can press equals and we can get that as our answer. Remember, we can use SD to change that to the decimal equivalent. But if we have a look here as the shift function, we can actually change that to a mixed number if we so wished. So we can press Shift and SD, and that will display, rather than an improper fraction, it will display it as a mixed number. Now let's say you wanted to permanently have your result as a mixed number rather than an improper fraction. You can press Shift, Setup, scroll down, and you can see option 1 here means that it will automatically give it as a mixed number straight away. So if we've got an improper fraction that we input, 5/4 equals, we can see we can give that as a mixed number by default there. Shift SD to display that again as an improper fraction. I tend to prefer to have it as a improper fraction, so select 2 on there, D/C, which means improper fraction by default. You can see that we've got a lot of options for exponents here. We've got defaults for squared on there. We can also do cubed, and we've got x to the -1 or the reciprocal function. So we can put 10 to the power -1. That will give us 1/10 as our answer. We can also input any power, provided it gives us a result that isn't too large for the calculator to cope with. We've got x to any power here, so that's quite a useful button. But the shortcuts to squared and cubed, because they tend to be the most commonly used. And similar for roots that we've got on here, we've got square roots here, so we can take the square root of a number. And if we want the cube root, well, it's just shift and that same button there, so that gives us the cube root of a given number. And we can do a range of different roots as well here. It's actually the shift version of that x to any power. We can get any root that we want here, obviously within reason. If it starts to become too complex, the calculator might not cope with it, so just be careful there. Now, abs stands for absolute. We tend to call that the modulus function here in the UK, but it's the absolute value function. So if you have a negative number, so let's say we want to find the absolute value of -8, press equals, that will give it as 8. And obviously we can have more complex calculations within the absolute value if you press that button first. Additionally, we also have log buttons here. So we have a log with any base. So let's say we've got log of 2, log base 2 of 8 equals, well, that equals 3. 2 cubed equals 8. So what power do we need to raise 2 by to get 8? It's 3. So we can use a variety of different bases there, but we also have standardized logs here. We have the common log that will automatically assume a base of 10. So log of 100, close brackets there, equals, and then we've got 2 on there. And you can see that shift and that same button gives you 10 to the power of. So these are inverse features here. And the same here, we have the natural log, ln, ln8, for example, close brackets, parentheses, equals 2.079 and so on. And you can see that we've got the inverse here, exponential form, we've got e to the power of. So these are quite complementary here, so that works very well for us. So we have 3 trigonometric functions available here, sine, cosine and tangent. You can see that we've got the inverse available if we press shift, sine -1, cosine -1, tan -1. So for example, if we wanted to find sine of 30 degrees, sine 30, best practice is to close the brackets or parentheses here, press equals, and you can see that we've got a value of 1/2 or 0.5 there. If we have a value in radians, let's say 3/4, what we need to do is to shift setup and then change the angle unit to 4 radians. You can see now we have an R here at the top rather than a D for degrees. And then we can say do the cosine of 3, shift down here for pi, shift and this button for pi, you can see it displayed here. And then let's say 3/4 of pi. Navigate right here so that you can do a large bracket and you're not on the bottom of the fraction. Press equals, and you can see here that we have exact value, -√2/2. Again, press SD if you want the decimal equivalent. Now, you may have noticed here that we have a negative in a bracket. Well, this is the best button to use if you want to input a negative number. Now, the reason why, you can use the minus sign here, the subtract sign, but if we already have an answer in, we currently have this answer here, don't we, -√2/2. Let's say we wanted to input -8 again for another calculation. If I press this button, then it will automatically do the answer subtract and then whatever we wanted to do. So it'll use the answer from the previous calculation. That's not what we want. If I put that there, that isn't what I wanted. I wanted to use -8. So if I just start off by pressing this one, I can straight away input a negative number, -8 equals, and that will just give me that. So it'll stop that chain of using your answer from a previous calculations. Also, this contains a little reminder here that if we're doing the square of a negative number, you need to put it in brackets. So I'll just show you the difference. If I just did -8 squared, and press equal, I would get negative 64. Now that wasn't what I was after. I was after the square of negative 8. What the calculator's done is essentially found the square of this, squared 8, and then took the negative value of it. What I want to do is include a set of brackets or parentheses, open those up, negative 8, close the brackets, and then squared, and then equals, and we get this square of the negative number, which is 64. So just be careful when you do that. And we've also got the fact feature here. So if I wanted to do prime factorization on a number, let's say 360, if I press equals to make that my answer, and then press shift and fact, then I have that displayed as in prime factorization form, a product of its prime factors there. And this weird looking button here with the degrees and different sort of apostrophe looking things, that is the degrees, minutes and seconds button. That's very useful for time. So I wanted to change 2.5 hours to say hours, minutes and seconds. 2.5, make it the answer. It's 5/2, but if I press this button here, that displays that as 2 hours 30 minutes. So that's very useful. And it's also useful if I want to find out minutes as a fraction of an hour. So I could say no hours 42 minutes, press equals, make that my answer, and press SD. Well, I'll get 7/10, which means it's 42 minutes is 7/10 of an hour. So I can convert from minutes to hours there, which is quite useful if you're doing calculations such as speed and time. There is a video available on using this feature a little bit more if you want to find out more about it. Here on the left hand side we have the store and recall feature, which is very useful if we want to save values to then use in subsequent calculations. So let's say I have a value, let's say 456. If I then want to store that in the memory, I need to press shift and store. And you notice that there is an STO up here indicating that the store has been activated. Now we have different letters representing the different memories that we can store. So we've got A to F here, you can see that in the red font. We have X and Y, and then we have M, which is the independent memory, which we can add values to and subtract values from. I don't tend to use this. This can be popular, I think, previously with accountants and such for adding figures as you go along. I tend to use the other values here, particularly X and Y. I'm going to store this in A, so all you need to just press is you just need to press the button, and notice how that has then stored that into memory A. 456. If I want to recall it, I'll just clear this off by pressing AC. Then I want to recall, it's recall, and then I just go for A, and that'll bring the value up. If I want to use it in a calculation, let's say I want to do 52 plus, and then I want to add that value 456. What I want to do is access those red functions by pressing alpha, A, equals, and then that's use the stored value in a calculation. ENG here, it refers to engineering notation. I'm not going to cover that here, but we will have a look at the percentage button here, which we can do for working out percentage of values or expressing an amount as a percentage of another. So for example, if I wanted to find 28% of 900, 28 shift percent times 900 equals, and here I have the result 252. Well, let's say I wanted to express 5 as a percentage of 40. It's 5 fraction button 40, and then you have the percentage on the bottom like so, equals, I'll just press SD on that so we can have it as a decimal, 12.5. So 5 is 12.5% of 40. If you input a number and you make a mistake and you want to correct it, you can just press delete, which acts like a backspace. If you have a particularly long calculation and you need to add something, you can use insert as well by pressing shift and that. AC does clear your screen on there. I'll go over clear at the end. Then we've got here NPR and NCR. They work out combinations and permutations. So let's say we've got 3 colours, blue, yellow and red. How many combinations of 2 colours could I make out of those 3 colours? 3, NCR 2. I've got 3 different pairs, blue and yellow, yellow and red. and red and blue. Now if the order matters, then it's a permutation, so 3 shift permutations and then 2, and that gives you 6, because you can have red and blue, and they can have blue then red, and so on. So that gives you 6 different permutations. I won't cover pol and rec here, and I won't speak too much about these ones here, just to let you know about random integer. So alpha and then the point here. So you could use random integer, and let's say you wanted a number between 100 and 200, 100, and then you can see that there's a little comma here that we can use to separate those out. So shift and that, and then 200, close your brackets or parentheses, and if you just keep pressing equals, this will then generate random numbers between 100 and 200 for you. We've already discussed that there's the pi there if you want pi for any calculations, and there's also a singular e as well if you press alpha. And here we have a shortcut to science notation or standard index form. So for example, I could input 2 times 10 to the, and then you just press your power or your exponent here. So that's 2 times 10 to the power of 3 equals 2000. So that's a shortcut that you can use, as well as shift and this button here to get to 10 to the power of. And again, we've got a DRG here that I won't cover in this video. Let's take a look briefly at the other 2 modes. So if you remember at the beginning, we had a look at 3 modes that were available. So if I press mode here, let's have a look at 2 stat. And we've got a variety of different relationships between variables that we can choose. We're just going to focus on one var, which is one variable. Now we've got a small data set here, so I'm going to start with the first value, 5, press equals, and you can see that that is then populating the x column for our variables 2 and 9. So once you've inputted your variables in there, what you need to do counterintuitively is just press AC once. You'll be in stat mode, that's automatically by default in line input output. And then you can access some options to do with those data by pressing shift and 1. You can see stat here, and there's various different options that we can have. Let's just focus on 4 for var, and you can see here that we have n for the number of values, we've got 2 for the mean. Let's take a look at that. X bar is the mean, so the mean of our values was 7.2, and if we go back again and have a look, stat var, we've also got a standard deviation and sample standard deviation available there as well. And there's a few other features, so I'll leave you to have a look at those. The third mode that we have in there is also table mode. So I'm going to press AC and then mode, and then we'll select 3 for table. Now here you've got fx, so you're prompted to input a function of x in there. So let's just have a look at this function that we've got, y equals 2x plus 1. What we're going to do is generate a table of values. So we will input a start and end value for which the calculator will input values of x, and then they will produce values for fx or y automatically for us. So let's input our function 2. We want to access x, so it's alpha x plus 1 equals. Now start is the lowest value that we want our x to be to input it. Let's go for -10 to 10. You don't want to make this too large. The calculator only has memory to do so much. And then the step is basically the increment, how much it goes up each time. So let's stick to integers, so that's a step of 1, so it will increase by 1 each time. Press equals, and here you can see that we've got a range of the x values and the corresponding fx values representing coordinates on a graph for this particular function. And you can see there that we've got x from -10 to 10 and the corresponding y values in the fx column there. And there's lots of different functions that you can explore using table mode. You can explore and discover the behavior of the functions when you've got a variety of different x values without having to input them individually as you would in computation mode. A couple of things to show you last. I'm just going to return to mode 1, computation. Just take a look, we're still in radians at the moment, which if you remember wasn't the default angle unit. I'm just going to do a reset procedure, so if you ever get into too much trouble or are confused about where you are, it's a good idea to reset to the default settings. So to follow that, it's shift, Notice how a little S is displayed here whenever you activate Shift, and then it's clear here, so it's 9 for clear. You can choose to alter your setup, so your number format and things like that. You can clear out your memory, or you can do both of them here. All features is 3, so 3 equals to confirm you want to reset all, and then finally AC does a reset. Notice how we're back to where we started from there. And then finally, if you're all done, it's Shift and AC to switch the calculator off. So yours should go off there. Obviously I'm using the emulator here, so it will not display. So why not explore some of the features that are available there? We haven't covered everything. There's a few more features as well in the setup as well that we haven't had opportunity to have a look at here, as well as some on the calculator. But that is certainly enough to get you started if you're new to these models of calculator. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future videos, but that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time on the Calculator Guide.